Hello and welcome to the Business of the Business podcast. I am your co-host, JP John Possibly two-man power trip of wrestling. Joining me is my co-host, the wrestling financial genius himself, Mr. Lavie Margolin. Lavie, how you doing today, sir?
Hey, John, I'm doing well. I finally stopped coughing. So, apologies to the audience for the last like 6 weeks. But I know we have a big night tonight. But being a local, I know that you were at WrestleMania. I was going to say WrestleMania 2, but really WrestleMania the second night in Philly.
That was quite the show. It was nice to go. It's funny. I actually had sold the tickets right on eBay for double what I paid for them. So I'm like, even though I wanted to go, I was like, I got double my money. I kind of have to sell them. Then the guy couldn't pay. He couldn't afford it. Like I was like, well, why did you bid on it? If you, it was crazy. The guy was a jerk, but when you think about it, I was like, okay. And my buddy was like, "What? Let's just go." Like maybe that's a sign, that didn't sell. Let's just go. So we went and we walked down to our seats, and we're like, all right, let's get something to eat, and then we'll kind of reassess and go back down to the seat, kind of right by the entranceway, looking kind of in a corner in the 130 sections. So good seats, not crazy good, not crazy close, but decent, not far up either. I'd say more towards the ring than away from the ring. So we go, and there's like a suite area right behind where we are, and I got my food, and we're sitting down, and my buddy goes, I'm pretty hungry. I see they have like a spread of food here. Like nobody was in the suite. It was just us. We walked in, and they had a spread of food there. And my buddy just sits down, and he goes, and there was a drink cooler with beer and stuff. He goes, should we grab a beer? Sure. A waitress walks over, and she says to us, hey guys, and we're like, oh, jig is up. Here we go. You're gonna kick us out of the suite. She goes, what did you guys want to eat? Here's the menu. You can actually order food. And she goes, this is all free. She goes, if you want and pay, there's extra stuff like pork and like all this extra stuff was extra money. We're like, yeah, we'll just go from the free menu. So we got free food, free beer, cookies, popcorn all night, which probably been a couple $100, and it was all free just because we just sat down and pretended we belonged in the suite. So then these guys came and they sat in the suite who actually belonged there. And one of the guys said to me, because we were there first, he must have thought it was my suite. He goes, hey man, I don't want me to be rude, but would you mind if I brought two friends up to the suite? And I was like, I looked at my buddy and I was like, you know what? I was like, it's all right. It's WrestleMania. Yeah, they can come in. They can go. So the guy brought his friend to the suite thinking it was my suite. It was great. But it was an awesome experience. Like if that didn't happen, it's still an awesome show and a great experience. But because that happened, it made it even better. I mean, we're drinking free beer all night. My buddy's ordering chicken sandwiches for free. He got like four of them. I got a Philly cheesesteak. I mean, it was great experience.
I think there was just something about rest. I mean, I guess it was the second night, so maybe they should have gotten their things in order a little bit more. But I was seeing different stories about like confusion in the stadium. Like, I think it was a promoter from Georgia or North Carolina that brought his son to the show, and somehow they were trying to exit, but they made it like backstage in like an area, and they actually had a picture of like The Rock on a golf cart, and like
Yep.
they didn't have a picture of DDP, but like they ran into him there. And then there was kind of it was a sad story of someone going with their father who was elderly, and he didn't necessarily need a wheelchair, but it would have been helpful because like he had to like walk and walk and walk and walk, and then like they finally got to their seat, and he couldn't stand up, so he was just looking at the screen the whole time. But it just seemed like just not being used to running wrestling at a venue like this, that there was like it wasn't like everything was in order. Like in Yankee Stadium, you sit the wrong place, you're not in the right suite. They notice you right away. Here is sort of like more chaotic.
Definitely a little bit, but it's funny. There was a security guard like assigned to the area, and he like came up to us. He's like, "Best seat in the house. I love this area." Like he didn't question it either. He was just just thinking that we actually belonged there. But it was great. I mean, it wasn't too far from our seats anyway. But if we had to move back, but it was great. There was nobody behind us, obviously, because we're in the suite. Uh, good sight lines. Could see the screen well. Could see the ring pretty good. So all in all, pretty great, I thought, and I really enjoyed the show. I thought night two was a lot better than night one. Although night one, I did really enjoy the tag team match. I thought Cody versus Roman Reigns was awesome. And I just feel like the run-ins not made the match. They helped the match. They enhanced the match. Sometimes run-ins ruin matches, and I felt like that was one of the ones where it was the icing on the cake. It enhanced it.
Yeah, so on the opposite side, it reminds me of Sting's WrestleMania moment where it was just like too much.
Yes.
Or what was that? There was the GCW. We'll talk a lot more GCW tonight, but the GCW Hammerstein show where it was like, what was it, Hornswoggle? Like there was all these like random people like
Yep.
passing through. It was just like overbooked, trying to do
Yes.
too much.
But it was funny the way they did it at WrestleMania. It made sense. It's like, okay, the Usos, obviously bloodline, they have to interfere. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, Solo has to interfere. Cena needs to get his revenge on Solo since Solo took him clean out the game. Rock, of course, has to come out. You just don't know who's going to come out besides him. Then you have a sense Rollins going to come out and do something. The Shield was obviously what he was doing, but Undertaker was a complete surprise to finally kind of get the one up on the Rock. So I don't know. I felt like every run-in was good, and it was good that Cody got the dub, even though I'm still upset about it because I love Roman. But it was good that Cody got the dub and finished the story.
Yeah, I mean, obviously this was a historically long title reign anyway, but I do like when that number keeps ticking up. But I think they would have lost some fans. I mean, people always say like I'm done if this doesn't happen or whatever, and they stay. But like, I think it just would have been that disappointment, like Road Warriors not winning the belts in Chicago type of disappointment,
Yeah.
where like it is a story arc. They almost took him out of it, of course, so like they could have gone a different way, but like once he was there and back and like he had so much momentum, it did seem like time. And like on Raw, like it reinforced it for me more. Like I would like to see like Reigns, like not because I favor him over like Hogan or whatever it may be, but like it would just be cool to like to see like an ultimate like number. But I think it was time, and like it's sad to see that break, but Cody, like it just seemed like he really needed to win the belt from somebody that obviously doesn't watch week to week.
It was good. I think it was a good culmination. And hey, Raw, 2.4 million, the biggest number they've done in over 5 years. So obviously people were digging it. They were liking it for sure. But right now, Lavie, we are bringing in a very special guest joining us tonight. Nick. How you doing, Nick?
Good, how's it going, guys?
Hey, Nick, how are you?
Good. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes. So
I'm gonna apologize for my sound. I am in Manhattan.
no,
My apologies.
no problem. Maybe we'll get like a run in. You never know, like who might notice what you're up
I'll let
to.
you know if I see anyone.
Yeah. So Nick, welcome to the show. You're classing up the joint here with an art gallery exhibit. We've talked about like theater productions before, but I don't know if we've talked about like a museum or gallery exhibit of photography. So thank you for like taking our game up a level.
You're the only person that's ever said I've classied up the place. I am the white trash friend of all my friends. No, thank you for having me. I actually love your podcast. I love the show, so I'm a weekly listener. Yeah, this is great. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Appreciate, just to give a little bit of context to our listeners, but I'm sure many are familiar, and certainly with the news. You are a professional photographer, very much tied to GCW, but we'll learn a little bit more about all the things that you do. Your work is being exhibited in Visitors, is the name of the exhibit in Manhattan that's forthcoming, and it's also a book that focuses on GCW's most recent shows in Japan.
Yes, all of that. Yes.
So Nick Karp, I got to first ask though before we get into the exhibit and the book, obviously Visitors and GCW. I'm just curious, just you as a fan, like where did you grow up? Because we love to get that context before kind of getting into it. Where did you grow up, and like what were you a fan of?
I am born and raised in Queens, native New Yorker. I was into wrestling when I was a child. Like I remember having my ninth birthday watching WrestleMania 19. So that was like kind of the era of wrestling I was really into, was with Ruthless Aggression. Um, I slowly dissipated from wrestling for a while until my mid-20s. Um, and if you want me to go into that, I can. How I got back. Uh,
Sure, yeah,
there,
definitely.
there's a man by the name of Casanova Valentine who runs no ring shows in Brooklyn, and by trade I'm a music photographer, and I was getting sick of shooting bands. It just became repetitive to me, and one of my friends was like, "Yo, you got to see Cass's stuff," and I had never heard of this before, and I was like, "No ring wrestling? That sounds awesome." And Casanova Valentine let me shoot his shows, and I slowly became friends with him, getting into the little indie scene in New York. And from there, I somehow got into GCW, which is funny because he's never been in there. And like, I got involved in that, got involved in ICW, and then the pandemic hit. And Adam from Orange Crush, who's a very big art fan and a die-hard wrestling fan, and a huge supporter of my work, and one who's putting out my book, um, we had plans to do something with GCW during the pandemic, or before the pandemic was closed everything down. So when I saw death matches were still happening, I pitched them the idea of just pivoting from what our original plan was and making a deathmatch zine based on pandemic wrestling. And that's how I kind of got my start within the scene.
When you look at the photography end of things, were you always doing photography? Was that always kind of like
Yeah,
your big love?
yeah. I've been shooting since I was 15 years old. A lot of music stuff and a lot of event work, and it just naturally progressed into wrestling, which is always something I kept in touch with. But like I was in and out of watching it for a while, and then again, I guess the deathmatch scene is what like brought me back into it fully. And the first book being Death and COVID was what got me pretty like in the scene. So um, yeah, it's that developed my love of wrestling and developed I guess all my relationships within GCW and others.
What's so unique about shooting deathmatch wrestling as a photographer?
I mean, I love the danger of it because it's not a safe thing to shoot. Like there's glass coming at you. You have to kind of know the angles of where you're not going to get hit by because that's a legitimate thing. Even fans that see it, there's certain angles you can't really be in because the like tubes are going to go out of the ring and people get really hurt. I think I'm more like a fan of just like the overall culture of it and like the overall like. I think what GCW especially is doing is like kind of never been done in wrestling before. It's kind of monumental, and I think we're gonna look back like 10 years from now, 15 years from now, and look at these photos, and like I don't think they're gonna be iconic by any stretch of imagination, but I think they're just like just documenting a period in time within this that is unlike any other.
So it is a little bit dangerous out there for the photographer. I mean, they're not looking out for you at all, I guess.
Oh, for sure not. No one cares about my gear.
Now, Lavie, I know you got a lot of good questions for Nick.
Yeah, so Nick, and thank you for your support of the podcast week to week. Like I mentioned, as we began recording about 6-7 weeks, I was suffering from a cough that just wouldn't end. So thanks for sticking with us there. So, of course, one of our most prolific and popular guests is Brett Lauderdale of GCW, and from the sense that I get, like if you're good with Brett, like you're real good, like you sort of like prove yourself to him, and he's very loyal and there's a lot of opportunities. So like, how did you sort of get in and sort of like grow with GCW?
That's a great question, and I don't really know fully how to answer that other than um, the big thing with me with shooting the way I shoot is it's very invasive, and I understand that. And in wrestling especially, like 5 years ago, even 10 years ago, this would not have been a thing. Like I break kayfabe in a lot of my photos. I again, I don't consider myself like fully like documenting the work rather than like the overall scene, if that makes any sense. I know it's like kind of sounds condescending, or not condescending, but like pompous a little bit. But like the work I want to create with GCW is kind of everlasting rather than the momentary like storyline stuff. So I got my start because of Tamo. If you're familiar.
Yeah, he's with AEW now, or
He is with
yeah.
AEW now. He's a fantastic director, a fantastic producer, a fantastic shooter, and he was GCW's like creative like video guy for a very long time. Like if you saw the early vignettes of Spring Break, that's Giancarlo. Um, and Giancarlo's seen my work, and we've been in like similar music scenes, so he was the one who really like vouched for me. And within that, Brett allowed me to access to shoot a couple shows. I remember shooting one at House of Independence, where it was like a lot of people's like last show. It was like Jungle Boy's like last indie show, quote unquote. It was Janela, Marco, excuse me. And then after that, I remember shooting Philadelphia right when the pandemic was about to start. It had to be like March 13th. And I was in the crowd for that, and it was just such a weird day because I lost all my work, and I was already in Philly for other work, and like my friends were on tour, and they realized their whole tour was about to get canceled, and it was just such a weird day. And from there, having access to like a project that I wanted to make with the book, kind of a lot like Brett saw what I was trying to do, and really has never questioned anything I've done, thankfully. Like it's again, I feel like my work is invasive sometimes. So I'm really like blessed to have that that access that not everyone has.
Yeah, so a question of the moment, although I didn't plan this in my notes, I'm just thinking like somebody early on during the collective, they tweet out a picture and there it looked like, and it could have been something else. It looked like there was a lot more photographers at ringside that were shooting, and some people were complaining from the crowd. What was going on there, and how was that sorted out?
Okay, so resident photographer and seasoned vet Earl Gardner, prior to the collective, made a whole like spreadsheet essentially on who was shooting what, who was given what access, because everyone wants the same thing. It's like everyone wants the same shot. Like everyone wants to fight for the GCW spot in the Indies, and I get it. It makes a lot of sense. It's it's the popularized indie, but at the same time, you can't have 5, 6 photographers doing the same thing. It's just like it's redundant at that point. That first show was Defy, and Earl did not control the list for Defy because it's not a GCW show. So I think there was a couple of like people who were told yes, and then they all just stuck to the same side, which is stupid. But it's it got fixed by spring break. I don't think there was any other complaints on the internet. I was looking for them. But yeah, the schedule worked perfectly in terms of just coverage. Again, it can be quite invasive. So, especially with photographers, I did see that photo. Many people did send it to me, and I even like posted about it, being like, "Oh, welcome to the first show of the collective, guys." Yeah, well, that's not fun. Like, do you think I want to shoot with 5 other people getting the same exact photo as me? That doesn't sound appealing.
It was interesting because most of the photos that I was seeing were just like the side, the two sides of the ring, I guess, that were like just set rows. And then it wasn't until I forgot. I think it was one of the Japanese promotions that just like gave a photo that showed the scale of the room, that there was just a lot of like standing room, and just gave me a different perspective.
So for spring break, it got a little hectic. So what I try to do for like, especially multi-man matches, like there's too many people ringside, and people can get hurt. Like, there's people jumping off ladders, there's people jumping off turnbuckles like into the crowd. Like you're gonna be in the way. So I try not to shoot like too many multi-men ringside. And most of my work isn't necessarily ringside. Again, I like to shoot like a lot of the backstage stuff. I like the moments before a lot of these performers go out, like the preparation, like them getting into the zone of like, oh, they're about to do a death match, and like seeing that mental, like again, like that mental preparation and shooting that is like the real intimate moments I love. Um, but with like the multi-man, like, yeah, I'll go back and shoot the room. Like, I don't need to get ringside for every match. That's not my assignment. I'm sorry, I'm in Manhattan. Sorry for the honks.
Sure. Now,
Uh,
was your photo now the way you're describing your work? I'm wondering, was your photo? There was a photo of ICW. I think it was Indianapolis, and it was taking place in a school. So there was like the deathmatch wrestlers, sort of like waiting. Sort of their locker room was a classroom. So people were sitting in these like little desks, and somebody
I
had
don't
like
know. I don't know if that was me, but I did do King of the Death Match during COVID, which was in an abandoned furniture store in Indiana,
okay.
uh, which is also just a super weird thing. And their backstage was just like the biggest, darkest room you've ever seen, and did not look appealing. There was no bathroom for talent. uh, yeah, I try to use the environment around me. I don't know who shot that, but I want to find out who shot that now.
Are you like, in terms of like adventures that you plan to do you ever want to, like, if Ian Rotten is, I mean, he's always comes back and runs, like, do you want to go shoot like an Ian Rotten show just to like get that
Oh,
experience?
absolutely. I did King during the pandemic, which is the weirdest time to shoot. Again, like you have all these people like separated from each other, but not really. Everyone's wearing a mask, but not really. Again, this was like June 2020, July 2020. This is like peak pandemic. This is before the vaccine. This is before like it was safe to go out fully. And again, I just don't think like there's a period in time quite like that. Yeah, absolutely. If Ian Rotten has a show and allowed me in all access and wouldn't charge me at the door like he did at King of the Deathmatch, I would absolutely do that. Hold on one
So
second. I'm sorry, guys.
yeah,
We're back. I'm sorry. Again.
no problem. No problem. We once had somebody, this was before we were doing the video. We were just recording just for audio, and I think they were older, so they didn't realize like that they had their phone on. And I'm like trying to signal to John, I hope they don't go into the bathroom or something, because they don't realize, like, they're just like holding their video open.
Yeah.
But it was like that. It was like a very much like a studio apartment, type of setup.
They're just in their underwear, just like hanging out. Yeah, I love that.
there was a lot going on. So let's get into the main event. So what I'm curious about is with this. With visitors, was this a concept that was planned in advance? So like you're like, okay, I'm going to budget. I'm going to go to Japan. This is what a hotel room will cost me. But besides just shooting the show, this is going to be like a book. How does that come together?
Yeah, so Adam works in like high art, and there's probably a better term for that, but like he works in real art. What I do isn't real art. I just document. I like the grittiness of the world. I think like I don't know. This is document. I consider wrestling like one of the last few American folk arts like around. And again, I'm a huge wrestling nerd, and I don't know if that might insult people, but like whatever it is. And again, Adam works in this fine art realm, and when GCW was running Korakuen by themselves, Adam had the vision of making this a book. So he entrusted me to do it because we worked in that Death and COVID book.
So now, being at a gallery, was that sort of like once the book came out, it was sort of like that this will work in that concept, or that was always the idea, like we'll involve the talent, we'll have a gallery, there'll be a print run, like a limited print run?
The limited print run was always in the books. The book was clearly like the main plan. I don't know if the gallery was in his idea, but I kind of pitched. I was like, I really want to do a gallery. It's kind of the only goal I had this year was to try to set something up like that. Excuse me. And you know, I have a couple of bucket list items I want to do, and the gallery was number one on my list. And so I couldn't be more excited to be a part of this and have my first solo show, especially with something I care so deeply about. Like, I love GCW, and I love the work I've been creating with them. And it's not, I don't think it's ending anytime soon. I don't think there's like an end for this. But I think the Corrigan stuff was very special. And I think that show was very special. And again, that the work made from that show, I think, speaks for itself.
So this sounds like a very specific circumstance that your work was commissioned and it was all planned out. Just in terms of understanding the general business side of being a professional wrestling photographer is one element of your work. What does that like taking the picture? Like, what are your rights to then do with the picture? Like, if John and I were like, hey, we need a new cover page for our podcast or something, can we buy this picture of Masha and like make it our logo? Or can we want to create like you're like, hey, these are good pictures, I'm going to make a trading card set. Like, how does that all work?
So I own all my work. I never signed anything away, even in music. There's been times where I've had work for hires, but I've never had that in wrestling. And I do shoot other wrestling companies as well. Like, I've shot for New Japan, I've shot for H2O before, I've shot for a couple other companies, ICW. But for the most part, I own 99.9% of my work. If you want to license something, that's fine. The deal I make with a lot of the wrestlers is, if they want, like, I want you to make your money. Like, this is such a grind and hustle, and I have such a deep respect for what people do, especially with their own bodies. It's dangerous. And again, I consider myself invasive in that space. Like, I'm not a wrestler. The locker room is sacred, and I am literally capturing pictures in that. So the kind of deal I make is, I know my work isn't like perfect for it, but like, if you want to sell merch of my work, I'm pretty easy to talk to. I don't have a set charge. I work with these people, you know. Especially in the indie side, like, I just want you to like be somewhat comfortable. So if you let me do what I do, I'll make sure to take care of you in the other aspect of that. If you want to sell 8x10s, here's my PayPal. Pay me whatever you feel comfortable with. I'm not paying my rent on indie wrestling.
I love it. It harkens back to the picture money. I'm thinking back to like the Rock and Roll Express or like the Tennessee Territory, and that was like a major component of like talent having something to sell. Great. Let me turn over to John.
Now, where can everybody find you and this exhibit as well?
So the exhibit is running from April 28th is the grand opening, from 6 to 8 p.m. at the NADA, N-A-D-A, East Broadway location at 311 East Broadway in New York City. Opening is on April 28th. It closes on May 5th. We're doing something, I think, before the GCW World on Lucha show. I cannot 1,000% confirm that, but I think that's what the case is. I don't know how public that is. We'll find out. We'll find out if I get yelled at. But we're definitely doing the opening gallery. We're going to have Effie there. We're going to have Allie, Jordan Oliver, Joey Janela, Jimmy Lloyd. A lot of the people that are featured in the book are going to be there, which is like all I wanted. Like, I understand, like, this is a solo gallery for me, and like it's a blessing. But I gotta have the subjects in it. It's like, this work wouldn't happen without them. Clearly, the book Visitors can be bought at orangecrush.art or visitorsbook.com, and it's really like the coolest, most beautiful thing I've ever put out. All the pages on the side are all hand painted red. It's gorgeous. It's really like, it's a coffee table book. It's something to show people, especially as a wrestling fan. There's not many like high art wrestling things I feel like available, and Adam really just outdid himself on it. It is the coolest thing I've ever been a part of, and I can't praise it anymore. And the gallery, I just got done seeing the photos, the proofs. and they look insane. It's like the biggest my work has ever been published, and the highest quality I've ever seen my work. So it's really cool to see my photos not on an iPhone, to be quite honest.
Now, where can everybody find you social media wise?
Nick Karp Photos, Nickkarp, and then photos at the end. Um, if you follow any of the GCW wrestlers, most of them follow me. Pretty easy to find. Yeah. Thank you guys for having me. Sincerely. I hope I didn't mess up.
No, thank you so much for joining us.
No, thank you for talking about it with Brett as well. Sincerely.
Nick, one last question before you go. Where are you? I'm
Absolutely.
getting where's that?
No, I said absolutely. I am on Avenue A and Houston, right outside of Wiggle Room. I just wrapped up a shoot with a couple friends, went to a gallery, and it was like, oh, I have this interview, and then I realized, oh, crap, it's 8:30. I guess I'd rather be out than be on the subway. So this was me compromising.
No, that's great. And I was going to say I was getting Rent vibes, like the play. So I'm not too far away in terms of the context. It didn't feel like it was. It didn't feel like it was above 14th Street. So I'm glad.
No, it's definitely not above 14th Street. Definitely right on Houston and Avenue A. I'm staring at the Double Down Saloon, if you're familiar.
Nice. All right. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you,
really
guys.
A pleasure, and we hope to have you back.
Thank you, Nick.
Absolutely. Thank you guys again. Sincerely.
Take care. Bye.
I thought he was going to say he was at the corner of First and First, an old Seinfeld reference, and then, then he'd think about it and say, "I'm at the nexus of the universe." If you remember that great episode, how could the same street intersect with itself?
I haven't thought about that in so long. I love Manhattan, but staying above 14th Street because you can't get lost. But once it's Houston and East Houston or whatever, then I'm just sort of circling around. When I went to the Sakuban show in Chinatown, I was kind of where am I? And it felt like it wasn't too far away, but it just kept going. I barely made it on time.
I love it. Now, completely switching gears here. Global Force Wrestling is back. What in the world is going on?
Yeah, so this surprised me. Not so much that Jeff Jarrett is doing a pro wrestling show at the minor league stadium, to which he's very much involved, because this is, besides being an AEW bigwig, I guess executive, right? It gets control. I know he's not a VP, but I guess executive. That didn't surprise me, but what did was seeing the Global Force Wrestling name. So I wanted to unpack that a little bit. But the Springfield Lucky Horseshoes, in partnership with Global Force Wrestling, Pro Wrestling Entertainment, and Newhoff Media, are ecstatic to announce Capital City Clash, a professional wrestling event coming to Robin Roberts Stadium on Saturday, September 21st. Springfield Hall of Famer, AEW superstar, and Lucky Horseshoe co-owner Jeff Jarrett played an instrumental part in bringing this exciting event to Capital City. The star-studded night will include wrestling talent from around the world, local Springfield celebrities and luminaries, and several spectacular surprises already lined up for this base brawl that will be a night of entertainment for all ages. Since the day we launched Lucky Horseshoes, this has been a dream of mine to set up a wrestling ring on home plate at the stadium with ringside seating on the field, said Jarrett. We're excited for the first annual Capital City Clash, and I already have someone local in mind that'll be on the receiving end of my home run guitar smash. So we know that Anthem had settled with Jeff Jarrett a number of years ago, but really, as far as I'm aware, none of the details about it came out. Originally, from my understanding, Anthem had purchased the Global Force name and everything affiliated with it. So, assuming that as they settled things, Jarrett got back the name to the rights to Global Force Wrestling, at least in name. Though the tapes or whatever it may be, is whether those were destroyed or not is another question. But I think it was 2017 that there was last a Global Force Wrestling show, which may have been one of those private shows, like sort of like for, I forget if it was for professional athletes or college athletes, sort of like to entertain them in the town, which isn't that rare. I think Jared has overseen a couple of those before, but it wasn't. And then public shows were like 2016, 2017. So I don't remember exactly the timeline in terms of the controversy with Anthem, but it's certainly been a while since the Global Force name was used publicly in such a way. I don't think it means that it's coming back as this ongoing promotion, but when the time is right and opportunity is right, especially for something like the horseshoes, um, uh, Jared can bring it out.
When you look at that, though, crazy that Global Force is back and he's promoting stuff. You know what I mean? Because he's in AEW now, and you thought that was in the rear view, but it's not.
Yeah, he just seems to love this Global Force name. I mean, I love the global name, unaffiliated with the show that ran on
Yes.
ESPN. Global Force Wrestling, I don't know. It's like a little bit like too much. Like there's the world, like it's like a little bit too much for me. I don't know if it's like the strongest brand. I mean, you can look at it sort of like sometimes when you look at something nostalgically, like you'd be like, oh, Cody Rhodes, how he'll develop there and so on. But it was just a series of shows, and they didn't really take off. And then suddenly it was part of Anthem, but nothing. It's basically neither here nor there. It's basically pro wrestling at the ballpark, which worked very successfully, like for the Brooklyn Cyclones for a number of years, first with TNA and later with Ring of Honor. But I just think that sort of model, especially the late summer into early fall, worked really well, especially when you plan it right 3-4 months, or depending how long a minor league baseball season is. You let people know the first week or two, and then every time they come, they know that there's a show coming, and people are usually sort of like, yeah, I'll go to that once. Like if you try and push it too much, like I don't think it'll work, but like once a year at a baseball stadium that does, decently. I don't know what the horseshoes draw or whatever, but like if there's people coming through the turnstiles, you'll get a certain amount that would be curious and want to check something out.
What is up with WWE? Obviously, WrestleMania was absolutely great show, and they killed it in every metric. But what's going on? Maybe some collaboration going on? What is going on with Nick Khan over there?
So Justin Barrasso of SI had a little tidbit. Speaking with numerous contacts surrounding Khan, one of WWE's potential explorations is to engineer a collaboration with other wrestling promotions. That is an area WWE rarely explored during McMahon's 4+ decades of leadership, so it represents a new realm for Khan to make a lasting impact. He was the one responsible for giving Levesque the green light to work with then TNA president D'Amore, which led to Jordan Grace making an appearance in the Royal Rumble. We saw the pictures with Brett Lauderdale, who again was hinting heavily that discussions were at a higher level. Which made more sense once we saw things that it would happen. Like, I think to say that McMahon rarely did so, like it was sort of course he got the reputation because he ended a number of territories aggressively, but then later on with like smaller promotions, he did work with a lot, right? Like US stuff. It was sort of like if it would benefit him best, of course, why not, like strategically. But there were so many different times where promotions passed through and so on, from USWA to Smokey to
ECW.
OVW to ECW to promotions in Japan to AAA and so on. But I think it's like, to me, it's always most appealing when it doesn't become too formal. Like if people get too used to you working with them, it's not special. But if there's like a certain angle, a certain like one-off appearance, it keeps like the flavor of it.
For sure. Now the hotels you wanted to talk about for WrestleMania?
So there was an interesting graphic about hotel demand, which I would have liked to see like a little bit of a longer trajectory, because it's from CoStar. It was in one of their Philadelphia media outlets, and it was showing like for WrestleMania, especially like the peak days, there was occupancy around that as high as 70%. And then when you look further along in the summer, it's lower than that. Except, right, like one is much more recent than into the summer. So I'd have liked to see like a longer trajectory, like in terms of what was going on in March, the month before WrestleMania. But it again shows that a little bit contradicting the thing that we brought up last week, potentially, that people come out and they use the hotels. I don't think that was in dispute, but it does show that it is WrestleMania is a mover in terms of people coming into town and spending money on hotel rooms, which isn't a surprise necessarily.
Yeah, definitely not. Man, it was crazy to look at some of those numbers: most viewed, most merchandise sold, most sponsor money, and then I read Cody Rhodes sold $1 million in merchandise for the week. I was like, wow, $1 million for the week? That's like a year for a lot of guys selling merch. Holy moly.
I did see that as well. I guess it balances out what was it reported that The Rock was paid $9 million for WrestleMania?
Yep.
So Cody's going to have to sell a lot of merchandise. What's interesting in terms of reflecting on The Rock is that he just like 10 years on, or maybe it was 15 years ago. You can remind me. Excuse my language, but do you remember like when he came back one time and he was trying to get a catchphrase over called "boots to asses"?
Yes.
It was so awkward, and now he just like gets it so much. I guess like sort of like at that time he was dropped into the promotion. It was very cold, right? Like, and he was just there for a very limited amount of time. Like I think it was like around Survivor Series at that year. But now it's like jumping into like a hot angle, especially with like the bloodline and sort of extended family, however you define it, that really took off.
Now, obviously, WB killing the game with tickets. How is New Japan doing right now with their couple shows coming up?
So this is something that we've been talking about for so long, but I'm really impressed of how ticket sales have picked up for New Japan. We do see that bump like once they start announcing talent, and it always seems to be late, and Moxley is there, but Moxley, not his fault at all, but like AEW isn't really moving tickets to an extent compared to itself, I guess you could say. But once he was announced as going for one of the belts, that and other matches, I don't want to just claim that it's for him, but they've moved. On April 8th, WrestleTix reported that in the last 6 days at that time, that 840 tickets had moved then. So they were up to 6163 with the setup of 6627. And that was really impressive to me, just because how we talked about how many less expensive, like how many resale tickets were on sale at a less expensive prices. And then the newer tickets that were opened up were in the upper tier. So as we record this in advance of April 12th, I'm really curious to see what a final number will be. And maybe 6627 was their current setup. They might even open it up a little bit more because demand might warrant that. I wouldn't be surprised necessarily if from the 8th to the 12th, if they sold another 800 to 1,000 tickets, if they have the opportunity to open more up.
Not saying they're like WWE or anything, but for wrestling or even close to WrestleMania, but WrestleMania was like, all right, let's do 59,000. Then they made it 61. Then they made it 62. Then they made it 68. Then they made it 69. Like they kept opening the seats. I wonder if that's what New Japan will do too. It's like, if we get a little bit more, let's open up more. You know what I mean? Let's just keep opening up more and more. Because right when they originally had the setup, it was what 4,500 or 5,000.
Yeah, at the beginning it was like in 3 tiers if I remember correctly, and that seemed to work really well. It's the first 2 times because it was like it created this sort of like false sense of demand. I mean, there was demand, but like sense of scarcity, and then people were like jumped on it. And then the second time, the scalpers were like, okay, we better get it because we missed out the first time. But then by the third time, it had slowed down. So I guess the question is, right, this venue is 10,000 seats. So if you've already opened 6,600, it probably just depends on the staging and sight lines from there. So I'd imagine that there's room to open up like 500 more if they needed to, but I don't think they're going to forego like the full staging to like maximize like 10,000 seats, which I don't imagine that there would be such a demand for that unless like CM Punk got leave and is having the rematch with Jungle Boy or something like
Right.
that. Outside of something like that, I think they'll stick around. If they sell out the 6,600, that's another huge win. But there could be a little bit more room to open up to 7,000.
What is going on? Let's go back to GCW. What's going on with Game Changer?
So before we talk about all their like forthcoming shows, just a little bit of a note which has traveled. Like, so Sabu was under the auspices of GCW, but as Brett Lauderdale had said, this is for all of independent wrestling. So there's now an independent wrestling Hall of Fame and a hardcore wrestling Hall of Fame for both under GCW's auspices. So Sabu was booked for the Independent Wrestling Hall of Fame, and he was in the hotel, and he didn't show up. He was paid in advance, or at least part of it. And Sabu said he changed his mind. So maybe just dealing with anxiety. He's not somebody that's known for speaking in front of crowds, right? He obviously has performed in front of big crowds and many crowds, of course, over his career, but maybe just speaking in front of the crowd, or maybe just had anxiety, or a variety of things could have come up. So no one's necessarily like shaming or blaming, but it was just like a surprising story. So first, a look at GCW's like ticket trajectories, and then there was a flurry of on sale dates, which made sense because like the Collective was the focus, and then there's the New Jersey like deathmatch weekend, but new show announcements could have got lost in there. So just kind of looking at this, how high in LA, the return to the Ukrainian Culture Center is pretty much sold out for April 20th, except for general admission, so likely a sellout there. In Albuquerque, a smaller venue. It looks like it's in an office park, basically, like shot in the same area where Breaking Bad is shot. So that's sort of like thematic for the show. In terms of the rows that were opened up or were available to be opened up, those are sold out. So it's just general admission available. Where they start running into a little bit of trouble, I guess if you could define that in terms of sales trajectory, May 3rd in Tampa, there's 10 tickets left in the second row, third row, fourth row, and beyond. 10 or more tickets left. May 25th, Thalia Hall. The front row is sold out, but and this goes through that venue's website. You can get, I believe, up to 6 tickets at a time. So I did the maximum. There's available in second, third, seated balcony, and standing room. The box seats, which would be a fairly limited amount, were all sold out. So in the Columbus, Ohio, the Valleydale Ballroom, there's, let's see, when is this show coming up? So it's not for a while. And again, I always remind people that GCW tickets generally sell later. It's not like a first day type of trajectory where 80% of the tickets sell. So not to make excuses, but May 26th, so in Valleydale, plenty of front row left, 9, and second row, at least 10 tickets. Where we're seeing not surprising trajectory is the people like the death matches. A Tournament of Survival 9 in Atlantic City on June 1st. The 6th row has 10 or more seats remaining, as well as general admission, but first 5 rows are sold out, so that's pretty good. And then the following day, Cage of Survival 3. The third row has 5 seats left. The fourth row has 6 seats left, so those will likely sell out. And then general admission, so there's, of course, room to put more rows on sale as reserve rows on sale as demand warrants it. But just in terms of upcoming shows, GCW comes to Denver for the first time Friday, June 14th. at a venue called Jefferson. I don't have the full venue name in front of me, or it's a little bit small. I should have had that better. But what else? Houston, they're returning to the Premier Sports Complex. I believe that's where they were before, on June 28th. In Dallas, back to Gillies on June 29th. So a Texas double shot. And Toronto, a return on July 5th in the Opera House. I believe last time the Opera House, they co-ran it with what's the promotion? IWS out of Montreal. Here I don't see any signage yet for that. And they come to Cleveland on August 2nd at Temple Live, and a return to Rochester on September 15th in Water Street.
Rochester is an A-town, baby. What is going on in the world of TNA? Because they've got some shows coming up.
So TNA in Newport, Kentucky on February 18th and 19th. So just looking at a map from the first night, there's three-quarters of the front row is sold out, and then a bit of the second row, and then a little bit less beyond that. May 3rd and 4th, or at least a double shot in DC, in Albany, excuse me, not DC, but the capital of New York, Albany, May 3rd and 4th. So just looking at like one of the maps, Under Siege, very small reserved setup. Most of those tickets are gone, or maybe 60%. April 20th, so about a week out as we record the show, in Vegas, right, a double weekend. So one of those shows, about 400 tickets sold for a setup of about 1,200. So we'll see if that picks up, or if there's any comps there. Just a couple additional TNA notes. March 28th, they did we hadn't gotten as much viewership information as in the past. March 28th, they did 88,000 viewers on the first run, 74,000 prior to that, about the same in late February. So trending kind of lower following TNA's return episode. So as being called TNA on January 18th, which was 112,000 viewers, and then on January 25th, there was 102,000. And finally, remember we had talked about like the license for the TNA figures moving around and so on. The Power Town, which is really coming on with a number of figures of different sorts, they'll have a TNA, or by the time you hear this, they'll have had a TNA figure reveal. So nice promotion for their action figure line. You don't always see that being spotlighted on a wrestling show.
What is going on with MLW?
So MLW's Azteca Lucha show on May 11th, it looks like either the ticket sales really picked up, or some tickets were taken off the market. But there's like one section, like a full row, and then 60% about of a second row there towards the back. And then there's just a spotting of tickets left. So really curious to see how that actually looks. On July 12th, which is Blood and Thunder in St. Petersburg, they've moved most of the front row, a fair amount of the second row, and then a little bit of tickets around there. Most interestingly, they advertised a couple of new jobs. So there's 4 jobs listed on their website as we're recording this. A couple of them have been listed there for a while, potentially a couple of years. It even said video package editor and sponsor ad sales rep, but they're now advertising a travel agent and a producer director for their pre-tapes.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. I have to check those out. What is going on in the NWA?
So the Crockett Cup on May 18th at the OC Theater. Um, they've also moved the front row. They've sold the front row. And then some in the second row and a little bit beyond that. In terms of some of their other upcoming shows, let's see. So NWA Chicago, sort of like this offshoot affiliate that's also run by Billy Corgan. They've sold some of the front row. Last time, this show is until May 3rd, but they sold out last time, or it looked pretty full. NWA 76 at the 2300 Arena. Those are recently on sale, where a fair amount of the front row has sold. And the Dothan show, Civic Center, it looks like not till December. And there it looks like they sold a couple of rows deep with a little bit of spotting around.
What about Masked Republic, our buddy Kevin Kleinrock?
Yeah, it was funny. I was DMing with Kevin, just sharing ideas and so on. He's like, make sure to mention us on the podcast. And I was like, oh, don't worry, I already had something on in the notes. So as applicable, not just for our friends and colleagues, but we see a lot of promotions now, and not surprisingly, especially Lucha, leaning into Cinco de Mayo. So this is in and around Cinco de Mayo. A triple shot, May 2nd to 4th. We hit SoCal with 3 events headlined by El Idilio de Niños, Atlantis and Atlantis Jr. versus Felino and Felino Jr., direct from Arena Mexico to 3 intimate venues: the Garden Amphitheater in Garden Grove, Haven City Marketplace in Rancho Cucamonga, and the regular place that they sell out all the time, Agua Caliente Casino Cathedral City.
Love me some Masked Republic. They always are up to something positive for the luchadors in the wrestling business. But what else is going on in the wrestling business? Because WrestleNomics would be on top of it. What's going on?
Yeah, so beyond the WrestleNomics Patreon, they share regularly a list of like most popular YouTube videos and so on. So since the WWE and AEW ones and so on are usually discussed very much in depth, I just want to talk about some of those featured from March 1st to 31st in promotions outside of that. So although we can't necessarily escape all of the promotions. So CMLL, AEW or CMLL show, that was the top video for that month, about 248,000 viewers. TNA Masters Hair Pentagon Jr. versus Sami Callihan. This was a release from Slammiversary 2018, almost 200,000 viewers. Lucha Libre AAA Sting versus El Messias on Heroes Immortales. Retro show, of course. 117,000. I didn't remember Sting in AAA, so I have to go back and watch that. New Japan.
Yes, shockingly, yep.
Yeah, you can really build like an interesting. I mean, and they needed footage from different places, of course, for his retirement. But like, some of those, what was it, WWA shows, and it was kind of like a fun Wild West time in the 2000s. Naito's interview, 115,000. MLW, Once Upon a Time in New York, 110,000 viewers. What else that's interesting? Stardom, Julia loses the Strong Women's Championship, 84,000 viewers. Noah, Monday Magic, 80,000. Let's see if there's anything else besides the biggest promotions. I'm not sure how it's covered exactly, like if there was like a Beyond breakthrough match or something like that, if that would sort of fall in this net. But we see a lot of TNA, Stardom, New Japan, Lucha Libre, most viewed videos, which isn't too surprising.
And some good stuff, some good content, not just WWE stuff. And obviously, go to their YouTube, and I think Reigns and Cody's over 8 million views. But there's some other really, really good stuff as far as the world of professional wrestling. But let's wrap this bad boy up. Head towards the plugs. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at 2Man Power Trip. Lavie, what do you got?
So I reviewed the Randy Savage book. Not to give away too much, but it was 4.25 out of 5 flying elbow drops. So check that out on lioncupjobsearch.com. Follow me on X, Lavie Marg, Lavie Marg. Check out our LinkedIn group, The Business of the Business, Pro Wrestling Industry, of course, on LinkedIn. And we are the official business podcast of PW Ponderings. Of course, depending on if you're listening to the audio, you should know that you can watch it generally early via YouTube and PW Ponderings coverage. So we thank them for that, as well as we are distributed for podcast via the Creative Control Network.
Thank you, everybody out there, for listening. See you right back here and next time for a little business of the business.